Savings time begins at 2 o'clock this Sunday morning, and 1 billion timepieces in this country will be moved ahead so that Americans can get an extra hour of daylight for the next 6 months. At the Howard Miller Clock Company, the world's leading maker of grandfather clocks, workers already are turning the little hands ahead an hour on the hundreds of clocks ready for sale. Philip Miller, Executive Vice President and an expert on time and timepieces, is on the factory floor in Zeeland, Michigan. Mr. Miller, good morning.
Good morning, Katie.
Nice to see you. Tell me, what is daylight savings time and how did it come about in the first place?
Well, it's fascinating. The concept of daylight savings time started back in 1784, and it was conceived by Benjamin Franklin. It first went into effect during World War I in Britain in 1918, and the concept was to save energy that was devoted to providing light so it could be devoted to the war effort.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, and after the First World War, it disappeared again because the farmers didn't like it, because they didn't have daylight hours early in the morning. It came back again during the Second World War, and that was the first time it was adopted in the United States. And from there on, it's been practiced in the United States to one extent or another until the 1980s, when it was made a legal requirement nationally, and since then we've all sprung forward and fallen back.
Tell me a little bit about the clocks behind you, if you could, Mr. Miller, the grandfather clock. How did they come about it, and how did they get their name?
Well, actually, a grandfather clock really developed with the concept of the pendulum. It was invented by a Dutchman by the name of Christian Huygens in the 1600s. For the first several years of their existence, they were called tall case clocks, standing clocks, and it was back in the late 1800s. There was a very popular song called My Grandfather's Clock.
I know it well. I have to ask you a quick question. Why did the mouse run up the clock in Hickory Dickory Dock?
Well, that's another fascinating thing. Originally, clock mechanisms were made out of wood rather than metal, and they are lubricated with such things as animal fat. And so they had a problem with mice literally eating time.
Okay.
As they climb up and eat the gears on a wooden clock.
Mr. Miller, unfortunately, we're out of time, which is a disappointment. Thanks so much for joining us, and happy daylight savings time.
Well, Howard Miller is glad to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll be back in a moment with more on Today right after this.